everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Let a couple people trickle in here, but just wanted to take a moment to say, I know it's a busy time of year. Thank you so much for hopping on and joining us. We know your time is valuable. We're super excited to kick off the first part of our business building webinar series with our guest, Kelly Bond. As you know, our goal at Alibi Security is to provide unmatched support to our partners by arming you with valuable knowledge and resources that help you grow your business. And this series is an example of that effort. I'm going to give it another minute or so as people come in. But a quick intro before we get started. My name is Chelsea Davis, Channel Partner Programs Manager here at Alibi Security. Once we begin the presentation, I'll be monitoring the Q&A section for any questions that come in that we can get to at the end. So make sure to drop them there and not in the general chat. And we'll keep this session concise, around 25-30 minutes, to be respectful of everybody's time. If we don't get time for questions at the end, we'll be sure to still take those questions, answer them, and package them up for you after the series with the recording of the webinar. And with that being said, I am super happy to be here with Kelly Bond, our speaker, a security industry veteran with more than 28 years of experience, specializing in M&A, RMR, and growth strategy. Kelly is currently a partner at Bridgepoint Advisors. Kelly, thank you so much for being here, and I will pass it over to you to start us off.
Awesome. Thanks, Chelsea, and greetings, everyone. It is great to be here today. I was going to say it's great to see you, but I can't actually see y'all. So I assume that you are, that everybody's doing well. So I appreciate you taking a few minutes of your day with me, and I am really excited for this Value Builder series that I'm doing with Alibi. Just to reiterate what Chelsea was saying, we are going to have a Q&A at the end if we've got time for it. So if you have a question, please drop it in the chat. And then either way, we will get back to you or we'll answer them at the end if we do have some time. And then obviously everybody's going to be muted. So just know that we won't be able to hear you if you unmute and try to ask a question. So again, please put it in the chat. So like Chelsea said, if you are already an Alibi partner, you likely know that it is a strong focus of theirs to provide as many resources and forms of education as possible to create your success. And this Value Builder series is just another way to give you those resources. So I want to start out by letting you know that, like Chelsea said, this is a 6-part series. All of these are a list of the upcoming webinars. And while we may scratch the surface on a few of these topics today, we will definitely be digging deeper as the weeks go on. So be sure to watch for the links to register for all of the upcoming webinars. You'll get notice from Alibi, you'll see it on LinkedIn, and you can get it from the Alibi website. So be sure to register for those. Okay, so jumping right in. Exit ready. What does that mean? It is really about preparing you to build a stronger, more profitable company that will ultimately attract buyers or lenders if you're looking to grow and command higher valuations. And we are going to focus on the strategies to increase your long-term value so you can transition on your terms, whether it's through a sale, or a succession, or again, if you're borrowing for growth or your own acquisition. So what we're going to talk about today is market activity, what's happening in the space, what businesses are transacting, what business models are actually moving, and what are we seeing in the industry? How are those companies tracking their metrics and what you can be doing to do it in your business? And then ultimately really being able to build a strong business, which that's going to be the goal of all of the webinars that we're doing in this series. So let's start out by talking about the two different business models that we mostly see when transactions are occurring in our space. And when I talk about our space, I'm talking about the electronic security industry. So these are typically made up of alarm companies and integration companies. Alarm companies' value is usually based on their recurring revenue, or RMR. That's a very common term that we hear, recurring monthly revenue. And that typically is revenue that's coming from a contractual basis on anything from alarm monitoring, access or video cloud hosting, service agreements, managed service agreements. Those are all sources of recurring revenue. And like I said, they are usually contractually bound. And so when a business is being valued by someone like myself or a lender or another buyer, they are looked at based on their total recurring monthly revenue. Some people do it based on recurring annual revenue, but then that just gets divided out and brought back down into that RMR. The other business model type is usually what we see in integration businesses, but it also may be in manufacturers or central stations, and how they're valued is based on their overall revenue. It's based on projects, and every dollar that comes in is feeding their bottom line. EBITDA is an acronym for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, and it is not an exact science. In fact, Warren Buffett calls it phooey. He does not believe that it is the exact way to value a company. But what we found is it is the most common way. And so that is what we are using in the industry. So it's either RMR or EBITDA. And in our next webinar, which you definitely want to join, we are going to dig very deep. We're going to talk about the different types of RMR and the different types of EBITDA. And the question that everybody always wants to know, so let's just get it out of the way now. What is the value on those things? Well, I'm going to tell you, in my almost 30 years in the industry, the value on RMR has changed very little. And the multiples, and everything is purchased on a multiple basis in most cases. The multiples of RMR on most transactions fall somewhere between 34 and 38 times. That has not changed in all the years. Now, there are caveats, and there are a lot of them, and we will dig into that in the next webinar. But there are caveats that will either make the multiple higher or the multiple lower. With EBITDA, the multiples generally are somewhere between 5 and 10 times the EBITDA or the adjusted EBITDA. Again, so many caveats that change where those multiples may be, but that is where the majority of deals are transacting in our space. Okay, we're not going to spend any more time on that because we're going to talk about that more in the next one. So let's talk about valuation factors. First of all, you should always know your bottom line. You should be looking at your financial reports, consistently looking at them. And you should always know what your bottom line is. Are you making money? Are you hitting your targets if you've set them? Are you losing money? Typically, when a bank or a buyer are looking at the value of a company, they want to look at 3 to 5 years of financial statements. Now we're mostly doing 3 because we had COVID in 21 and a little bit of 22, and it definitely impacted a lot of companies. So what we usually try to see are 3 full years of financial statements. And what we like to see is steady growth, good margins that are also staying steady, and that your bottom line, you're actually making money. And not just that you're spending every dollar that you make so you don't have to pay taxes on it. And yes, that's a thing, but really, are you actually making money at the end of a year? If you're not, you've got to start to look into what is impacting your business that you're not making money. The next thing we're going to talk about is geography. By the way, backing up just a little bit, we are going to dig in that next series about, or excuse me, the next webinar about your financials and your bottom line. So if this is not something that you're paying really close attention to now, I'm going to give you some tools and things to talk about or to look at in that webinar. Okay, the next thing is geography. Where are you located? There is not a lot that you can do about it now, but it can actually be a factor in what you would be paid for the sale of your business and how quickly your business may be sold. So it's really good to prepare yourself now. If you are in a major market, and I will use Florida as a major market, even though you're saying that's a whole state, but anything in Florida sells very, very quickly. It's amazing how quickly those businesses sell. And they're often selling for above the average RMR amount. So if you're in Florida and you're running a good business, it's likely that you're going to sell really, really quickly. Now, if you are in El Paso, Texas, I'm in Texas, I'm a Texan, I love the state, but there are certain markets in Texas that if you are in that market, you are likely going to have a little bit of a harder time when you're coming up to selling your business. So if you know you are in a secondary market or a really small market where you may not have a lot of competition in the marketplace, plan ahead. If you have a 2-year plan, you may want to make that a 3-year or a 4-year plan. Know that it may take a little bit longer. Okay, switching lanes a little bit. How consistent is your business? Are you staying with the same manufacturers? And I would assume, as alibi dealers, which I believe many of you likely are, you are staying with some specific manufacturers for most of your business, which is great. Having too many product and product types and a variation of manufacturers can actually have an adverse effect on your overall value. And it's hard because you get into the business and you're looking at what costs are and how easy is it to get that product that I might want or need. And then all of a sudden you find, well, but I want to change to this because it might be a little bit cheaper or it may have some cool new technology. Make sure if you are changing product lines that you're doing so for a good reason. And then lastly, is your business model obscure? I'm going to give you an example of a company that I worked with that we had a hard time selling them. I'll be honest with you. And I didn't really know it going in because I had not represented that particular business model before. They started out as a locksmithing company, which many integrators actually started as locksmiths. And they went from locksmithing to doing gate work. And then they were doing steel work. And then they made what would seemingly be an obvious transition to offering access control and video. And with that, they were still pretty concise about what they were doing and they were keeping the same customer base. But all of a sudden they said, we need more revenue coming in. How can we do it faster? And they decided to add alarms and they started with residential alarms. Well, then they went to sell and they had this block of residential alarms and then the rest of their business. And all the business was put together, all the revenue was going into one pot. They were not tracking where revenue was necessarily coming from, where the costs were associated. Everything was just coming out of the big pool. And unfortunately, it was very, very hard to sell that business. It took a long time because they were so fragmented. So be sure, the lesson from that is just be sure you're paying attention to what you offer. And even if you can be all things to all people, make sure you're really good at all of them and make sure that you're tracking the metrics on all of them. Okay, so now we're going to get into how do you track all of those and what you should be looking at in your business and a great overview of how to know how well you're doing. So I am a huge fan of key performance indicators. These are ways to track health in many, many different aspects of your business. And it doesn't matter if you've got 5 employees or 500. There are KPIs that you can be paying attention to in your own business that will help you understand if different products and services are actually making money for you or if they're hurting you. So I'm going to give you just a few examples of KPIs that might make sense for you to offer within your own businesses. So let's talk about first marketing KPIs. So there are a couple of things. Actually, these are some things that you can get through Alibi if you don't know about it. We're going to talk about it in one of the further webinars, but did you know that Alibi gives you the opportunity to run net promoter scores on your customer base? They do, and they make it very, very easy for you to do it. This is the Net Promoter Score is measuring your customer loyalty and their willingness to recommend you. And that's a key feature that you should want to know about your company. Are you doing a good job and are your customers happy with you? There's also a customer satisfaction survey. It's called a CSAT, and it is a measure of how satisfied your customers are with your products or services. Great way to tell if you're offering the right things to the customers. Next is something that's a little bit harder to measure. It's going to take a little more work on your end, and you may want to take a subset of your customer base to be able to do this, but it's your customer lifetime value. This is the total revenue that a business can expect from a single customer relationship. And what that might help you do is if you've got some enterprise customers over here, some small businesses here, a few chain accounts up here, where are you actually making money? And do you want to refocus to make sure that you're hitting that right target? So let's talk about your website. Are you tracking your website? How many people are going on there? How many hits are you getting? Where are they spending time on your site? And if you find that everybody's going to the same place, well, you may want to beef up that spot, give more information within that area, but you need to be tracking it. Some sales KPIs. How long does it take your leads to convert into a sale? And then looking at the percentage of your overall leads that actually become paying customers. That's something that you should be tracking every day anyway. I don't care if you are a one-man show. You want to understand that. It's very, very important to understand, is it worth doing that particular account? Am I making enough money on it? And how much did it cost me to get that customer? Also, the sales cycle. And I already mentioned, how long does it take to convert a lead into a sale? But how long did it even take to get that lead? And how did you get it? So that's something that you want to be tracking. Another thing is, how long does it actually take from when the customer signs on the dotted line for you to get the installation completed? Now, granted, if these are large enterprise installations, it could be months, it could be a year. We know those behave a little bit differently, but if you're doing very consistent, let's say small business, you should have a pretty good idea of how long it's going to take you. And then also, you should be tracking if you have to go back after the first time that you were there for that initial install. Are you going back to fix things after? Be tracking these, because those are all things that are costing you money. Now, we'll talk a little bit about your human resources, especially if you're a larger company. You want to think about, how long are your employees staying with you? And I will tell you, buyers want to understand that. They want to know what the longevity is of most of your employees. They also want to know, if they're only there a couple of years, why are they leaving? So you need to have a general idea of this. Now, you may not know exactly why, but it's something that you can absolutely be tracking so you can talk about it later. And then employee satisfaction. Well, you're obviously going to know if people are leaving, they are not satisfied for some reason or another. But you also want to poll your employees periodically. Give them the ability to give you feedback on how they feel about working there. And also, it's a great time for you to get them more involved. I'm going to go a little off rail right now, but I just want to talk to you a little bit about, if you're an owner of a small company and you wear all of the hats, it can be very difficult when you go to sell that business if no one else knows the things that you do. So one of the things in employee satisfaction is making sure your employees have the ability to grow within your organization. Can you hand off responsibilities to them? And it is important. You may not think, well, what does that really matter if I sell? Well, it matters a lot, because if you want to go away, if you're ready to spend your evening watching the sunset and not thinking about work, you got to make sure that somebody else can handle all the things that you did. And then finally on that, we'll just talk about the cost per hire. Think about what it costs you when you're hiring somebody. Um, and really look into all of it, including the time spent to get them trained, to get them put into your organization, and all of the pieces that have to come together to make them an employee. So those are things that you can track within your business. If you don't do KPIs, start now. There's nothing that says you can't start today. I don't care if your business is 20 years old. You can start now. And I really, really encourage you to start with the sales track and start doing some of those things, and then customer satisfaction. Those are probably the two that Alibi certainly has tools available to really help you with this. And that's definitely a great place to start. Okay, changing lanes a little bit. So, economic conditions, and we've kind of been through it this year. We've been on a little up and down, but we know that, and it's okay. We also know that economic conditions can absolutely impact the security industry. They can impact our businesses because they create both challenges and opportunities. When there are downturns, we know that customers may cut costs, but we've also seen where crime increases when that's happening. And we've got to be able to pay attention and be prepared to raise the demand for security, because we know a strong economic economy can reduce the perceived need for security. So we want to be paying very close attention to it, and we've got to be adaptable. If you are running smoothly and you've got referrals coming in and business is going well, and then all of a sudden we're seeing a huge economic downturn, you want to have RMR in there so you've got something to keep the lights on. But again, we'll talk about that on the next one. But you also want to make sure that you are a resource for your customer, because they may see that things are changing. They need to up the security in what they're doing, and you want to be there and be ready. So some things that you want to be thinking about. What can you do to help make your security affordable in an economic downturn? Especially if it's an RMR situation, you may be able to do things like give them a break for 2 or 3 months and add it to the end of a contract. You may want to create scenarios like that your employees are empowered to do, so that you're keeping your customers and you show them your loyalty as well. There are things that we've all been faced with this year, and those were supply chain issues last year and this year. I mean, we had a massive chip shortage. I think we're all mostly good now, but we had to bob and weave to get through that and make sure that we did not lose customers, and that our customers didn't lose customers because we didn't have the availability of what we needed from a product perspective. This may also create a time where, if you were looking to transact or you were looking to grow your business through acquisition, that you're going to have a harder time in doing that. Lenders may say, you know what, you are too risky for us, it's too small, or the interest rates are so high that it just doesn't make sense for you financially. So those are things that you always want to kind of be prepared for as much as you can. I mean, none of us can fully be prepared, but the things that you can do and the game plans that you can put in place to say, hey, listen, we're kind of up and down right now. And if interest rates don't come down, what is that going to mean for us if we were looking to make an acquisition? And then also just, think of the opportunity that this creates for you as well. If there is a perceived risk factor out there that your end user may have, it may be the time for you to talk about new technology, new opportunities for them, and so that you are actually providing the answer before the problem actually comes to play. Okay, so when I'm talking to companies about becoming stronger and becoming more valuable, we talk about things that they can do to potentially make changes in their organization, but there are questions that you need to ask yourself before you add any new products or a new branch, or you do an acquisition or you sell something off, even if you're just hiring new people, these are some questions that you need to ask yourself. Does picking up a new product line or service really make a difference in your customer base? Are you doing it because it was a shiny new penny? Are you doing it because the company down the street is offering it and you feel like you're losing business to them? Ask yourself the questions and then say, does it make sense though? Because is it going to add measurable revenue to my business? And then ultimately, you've got to say, what impact is this going to have on my team? Is it going to take months of training for them to get up to snuff and really be ready to offer this new product or service that we've got? So, and then ultimately, will this make me more valuable when I am ready to sell or transact? And think about it in those terms, and it will help you make a better decision on whether or not you make the changes in your organization. One, I want to share just a quick story with you. A company that I worked with last year does about 5 million in revenue year over year, and they had an opportunity a couple of years ago to take on a project that was going to add an additional $1 million of revenue for them, which was awesome. But it took them a year to do it, and it tied up pretty much all of their resources. So the business that they were typically doing, they really had to, not take that year. They just did not have the resources to do it. They knew this was going to be a one-time deal, but they decided to go for it because, hey, $1 million, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of revenue to add. So what they didn't anticipate is that they were going to sell the following year. And they came to me, I did a valuation for them, and I talked to them about that 1 year and said, and it happened to be the last full year before they went to sell. And I said, look, you've got to understand that this was an anomalous year, and most buyers are going to knock out that number. They're not going to say your EBITDA should include that additional $1 million in revenue, because you're not going to have that again. It was a one shot and that's it. Well, they really had a hard time with that, and they had decided that they were ready to sell because their value is up so much more. Well, the reality of it was every buyer came in and said, we got to throw out that year. We cannot count that year. We've got to take the 3 years around it. And that's how we're going to come up with the EBITDA value and ultimately what they were willing to pay for the business. So that might have been a great decision to make all around. And had they not needed to sell the next year, it probably would have been an even better decision, but it did impact them. So when you're talking about making changes to your organization, think about a 3 or 5 year plan, see how it's going to impact you, and ultimately if it will drive value. Okay, so if any of you have ever heard me speak before, you've likely heard me say this: run your business today as if you're selling it tomorrow. Even if you've been in business 20 years, change your habits, make them better. You are going to get a lot of tips over the next 5 webinars. Adopt some of those. Bringing those processes into your business today is not only going to make your business more valuable, but it is going to make your business more efficient right now. So take advantage of it. That's why Alibi wanted to do this series, again, to make you more efficient and more valuable. So I know it's hard to do what feels like going backwards and making changes, but if you do make those changes now, I guarantee you will see the value in the end. Okay, whew, right on it, just right on the money. Here is the next webinar that we're doing on September 30th, where I already told you we're going to dive in to RMR and EBITDA and where is the value. I'm going to give you some tools that you can use to actually apply within your own business so you can kind of track this yourself. And now here's me. If you want to connect on LinkedIn, please scan that QR code and I'll take any questions that we may have.
I didn't see any live come through, Kelly, but I did drop a note in the chat with the link to the next webinar as well as the schedule for the full series. So be sure to check that out, register. Even if you register and can't make it, you will receive a follow-up email with the recording session. So just register. If you can't make it, you'll receive the recording after.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. Thanks for being here, and tell your friends, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you. Take care.